guys. Today we're going to do a little top tip for you guys. It's going to be a knot. This is a knot that I specifically use for throwing stick baits and poppers, especially if I'm targeting things like GTs and wahoo and also kuta as well, because as you'll see it adds a bit of bite off protection as well, and it's one of the few knots around that gives you about 100% knot strength, so extreme confidence in your knots, and adds a bit of bite off protection as well. I also use it when I'm slow pitch jigging as well, because I don't like to add wire to my jigs. So what I'll do is this knot will just protect me a little bit more to bite offs from things like kuta and wahoo that do really love to eat these slow pitch jigs. So yeah, it's not a complex knot, but it's definitely something that you're going to have to practice. You can use it from anywhere from about 60 pound up. That's usually where I start using this knot, because anything lower than that it kind of defeats the purpose a bit. But yeah, so today I'll be just doing it on a stick bait for you, something that I'll throw for GTs, wahoo, kuta, lovies as well. So it's definitely a knot that I use whenever I'm throwing for the toothy critters or for big GTs like that when you need a really strong knot. So we'll start off with basically, I'm going to start using with a 100-pound leader, something I'd use for GT fishing when it's not sort of heavily fouled area, or your wahoo or your big kuta. And I like to use the slightly softer fluoros for this knot, just makes tying it a bit easier. You also need a lighter or a match or anything like that, and just a pair of line cutters. So basically what it is, it's a chain knot, similar to the AG chain knot, but I call it a TN knot. Basically it's 3 wraps around the swivel followed by alternating half hitches finished off with a half risotto finish, which you'll see what I mean by that now. But what you want to start with is just make sure that you've got nice tension on your line. So what I like to do is just wrap it around my foot. Give yourself about a meter and a bit. Just do one wrap around your foot and you can just hold that nice and tight. So you've got some nice tension here. Then what you do is you thread it through the swivel. I always like to use swivel and split rings on all my lures and slow pitch jigs. This gives the lure that freedom and also just helps with your knot strength and gives that added bite off protection as well, and you can change your lures very quickly. So thread it through the swivel. Give yourself, I'd say, about 30 to 40 centimeters to be safe, especially with throwing stick baits and poppers and things with these big fish. I like to have a long leader, at least 2 and a bit meters. So once you've gone through once, you're going to take your line, you're going to go through a second time next to that line. You're going to pull that down. Make sure it's wrapped nice and tight around your foot. There you go. Yeah, so you go through once. Go through a second time. Forming a little loop there. Go through a third time. And you'll see it'll form those 2 loops next to each other. Like that. And what you do is you're going to go under your main line, through the 2 loops, like so, and then under the loop you've just created, so you ended up creating 3 loops. All you do is you slowly pull tight, making sure that all those wraps are lined up next to each other on the swivel. What you don't want is the loops overlapping each other. So you want them to sit 1, 2, 3 in the swivel there. So before you pull tight, just make sure those loops are all sitting next to each other. And you can just pull this nice and tight. Yeah. From that point, you're going to start with alternating half hitches. So you're going to start with an over half hitch. So you go over the line, and you come back through itself on the loop. All you do is you pull up and pull tight. I like to pull it tight at about 120 degrees. And now you're going to go to the under one. You go under the line and back through itself. That's an under half hitch. And then you go over and under. You're going to alternate half hitches. I usually like to do about 16. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. What was that one? That was 8. That wasn't over. 14, 15, 16. And I always like to finish with an over, so I'll do 17. So you should end up on an odd number. So between 15 and 17, I just like to end off on an over one to set the tag in the right way for you to do the next finish. Then basically it's a half risotto finish. So you're basically going to go over like you would a half hitch, come through like you would a half hitch, but then go around 2 more times. 1, 2, 3. So it's a half hitch, but you just carry on going around 3 times. All you do is you slowly pull that tight with a bit of moisture, make sure that it suits itself nice and neatly. You don't want any overlaps. Yeah, once that's seated, really pull these knots tight. Once that is seated nice and tight, cut the tag end off, leaving about a centimetre or so. Wet your knot nice and thoroughly, and then just burn the end down. You can burn it quite close. Just make sure that your knot is nice and wet so you don't burn the rest of your knot. And I just use my nail to flatten that back so it won't slip through. And what you end up here is this nice chain link knot with 3 extra wraps on the swivel. So it still has lots of freedom using the swivel and slip ring, but you've now got an added sort of, I'd say, 4 centimeters of protection there. So what happens is GTs can sometimes chase you off, kuta and wahoo can bite you off, but I found with this knot, if their teeth just nick it under tension, all it does is it cuts 1 or 2 of the half hitches but leaves the rest of the knot still intact. So it keeps your main section of the leader intact and protected from those teeth. I mean, if a wahoo or kuta had to bite through that, it still would, but this adds a little bit more protection. And I've had these knots come back with a few scuffs and nicks, but the knot stays intact, whereas if it was just a naked sort of 3-10 figure 8 or something, you would get bitten off immediately. Some guys say it adds in rubble protection if they take you into the reef, just a little bit more, but it doesn't affect the action in any way and just protects you just that little bit more, and it's incredibly strong. So if you're planning on throwing stick baits for GTs, poppers for GTs, and planning on throwing any of these lures for kuta or wahoo, I'll stick with a knot like this. And especially if you're going to be dropping slow pitch jigs in areas where wahoo and kuta are present, I would highly recommend using a knot like this. Just give yourself that extra peace of mind and that it may protect you. Cool, thanks.